Today's topic is building an embedded platform for big data in manufacturing. And I'm Ranbir Mazumdar. I work for Oracle. I'm a principal sales consultant for the worldwide Java sales. My interest areas are industrial automation, manufacturing, and the whole emerging architectures which most of the people are dealing with. So I will be co-speaking with my friend and partner Atulan Vijay Raghavan, who is the CTO of System Insights, a company we are partnering with. And essentially what we'll try to do is give you guys a flavor of what is cool and how to make sense of big data, especially in the manufacturing space. So this is a quote which I found on the Human Face of Big Data project. It essentially is a project by Rick Smolan, who is a photographer and who is trying to create the human face. He's trying to capture the human face of big data, because big data is different for different people. So what this says is during the first day of a baby's life, the amount of data generated by the entire humanity is equivalent to 70 times the information which is contained in the Library of Congress. This kind of gives us the scale of data which we are talking about. So which brings me to the question, what is big data? Is big data something which is really big? Is it something which needs specific architectures, concepts, platforms to deal with? Or is it something more? Where I stand, big data essentially is a convergence story. We as human beings, we are creating tremendous amount of data today. And I was giving an example in my previous talk where overlaying weather patterns with the GPS locations or coordinates for taxis in Singapore are telling people that cab drivers in Singapore don't necessarily like picking up customers or rides when it's raining. And the reason they found out when they did this analytics was because somewhere in Singapore, it's always raining, and there is a bond which these guys have to fulfill if they get into an accident. So essentially, the amount of analytics which is involved in getting to these simple solutions is mind-boggling. And we look at this whole big data as something of a convergence story. So it's a convergence of the compute which happens at the back-end data center, and the compute which is happening now in the nodes, in the edge devices. So essentially, it's a nodal versus the infinite compute possibilities of the cloud. That's essentially what a big data architecture should address. So what do we mean by this convergence, and how is data being generated? If you see, this is kind of more like a feedback loop, where you have human beings, us, we have these different touch points. So we have cell phones for our personal lives. We work with desktops, laptops, iPads. When we are in a manufacturing floor, we are interacting with all these shop floor machines, CNC machines, which are cutting things up, slicing and dicing them, creating something meaningful. And essentially the interaction is human beings are interacting with devices which essentially have a lot of compute already built into them. And that compute provides us a mechanism of correcting the course. So if something is going wrong, we want to find that out early. If something has gone wrong, we want to find out why. So this is essentially a big feedback loop. And that's what is essentially the crux of the big data. Now, of course, we are talking about Java in all this, and I wanted to give you a snapshot of why Java and what is the Java Internet of Things. So these are all buzzwords we hear. Essentially, 31 billion devices, and this is projected to be around 50 billion by 2025. We have 4 billion people out of 6.5 billion in the world already connected in some way, form, or fashion. What we are predicting is all these edge devices, sort of the leaves in a tree, these are exploding. These are exploding because we have on us now at least 3 or 4 devices which we use. So we have an iPhone or an iPad, we have a laptop, we have a desktop back at home, and we are interacting with smart set-top boxes, TVs, Apple TVs, whatnot. So we already are talking in terms of data being generated, consumed, and all of this data has to make sense. So the traditional view of the edge to enterprise was have these edge devices, which you see here are personal devices, phones, you have industrial controls, you have meters, all of these spinning out enormous chunks of data, and then the compute happening at the back end. So you have these cloud-based strategies. Oracle has a whole platform which deals with the whole cloud-based aspect of doing big data. So we have analytics, we have intelligence built in. And this is essentially what we have. So Oracle has the most strategies covered for the Internet of Things. So we have a complete stack, which is the Oracle Java devices in data centers, off data centers. We have solutions which are end-to-end, which are best of breed. And all of this is built on Java, which is an open standard. We put in a lot of effort in creating that vertical integration points. We make sure that these things are bulletproof. So essentially what a consumer or a customer gets is an on-premise or a private public cloud offering or a hybrid. So you today can have Oracle provide you with that snapshot view of the backend cloud and provide you the big iron, the big analytics to go with that. Now, what we wanted to do in this session, by the way, this whole embedded cloud and device to data center architecture is probably worth 3 or 4 sessions. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to introduce you guys to a more narrower focused view where we think an important use case of this whole edge to enterprise architecture is how to push back or stream some of the analytics or create some of the analytics on these node devices. So we all know there is a latency issue. There are issues by which if we send information back to the cloud and the cloud does the compute and comes back, we waste cycles. So essentially what we want to show you guys in this session is how can we embed some analytics on these edge devices, on the leaves, on the nodes, and why to do that. And of course, Atulan will go in more details specifically from the manufacturing perspective. But before I do that, let me give you the value proposition of Java. So why are we so upbeat about Java? Because essentially if you talk to a CTO or a CEO of a company, what essentially they are trying to do is they are trying to grow the ROI and reduce costs. And Java essentially delivers on that promise. So we have a product life cycle which is updated, which has roadmaps. You have competitive advantage. We have business focus. We have a developer ecosystem which is matured, which is there for the last 15 years. We have increased market reach. We have the best partner ecosystems. And all of us know that we didn't create the world alone. We all came together. Some people have specific niche talents, and we need to build that ecosystem, work through that ecosystem to create a solution which is cost effective and makes sense. And how do you do that? How do you reduce costs? You reduce costs by making things portable. So you have different architectures which make sense for different technologies. So you have guys who are working on PowerPC technologies. Other people are working on ARM. So there are these different business challenges which we always face. And how can we have a technology which essentially is write once, run anywhere? And that's what Java is. So what we wanted to do was I requested Atulan to kind of give us a deep dive business exposure to what manufacturing domain is doing in terms of event processing and edge analytics, as we call it. So this is what we have. So what Oracle is doing is we are working to create a model where we can have a notion of an architecture which is actually doing edge analytics for us. So we currently have a product which is called the Oracle Event Processor, which essentially streams events through the cycles So you have these edge devices, you have the gateways, and you have the back-end servers. All these devices are communicating with each other, events are being generated, and these events are captured, and there is analytics which is done on them, and we are creating solutions. So this is the stack view of the OEP, which is the Oracle Event Processor. And what we are showing here is essentially Java-based stack. We have the Java embedded stack, which gives you security management, different kinds of UI or HMI libraries. We have standard networking I/O, which comes baked into the product. We are providing an embedded database, which sits on top of it. And then we also have announced our new product, which is Java Embedded Suite, which is called Jazz, which essentially builds a glassfish or a scaled-down glassfish on top of the embedded stack. And of course, the OEP is an event processing mechanism, which is basically a set of APIs which allow you to do OEP, the complex event style processing, which sits on top of it. So that's basically what our vision is for the edge analytics. So what we believe is there is a time and place for doing compute at the back-end cloud, but there are use cases where it makes sense to have a near real-time decision-making capabilities and push the analytics to the edge devices. And Atulan in his presentation will go more deep into those. But this is basically the Java value proposition. So what we are doing is we are enabling edge processing. So what we do is these devices are doing data reduction, filtration, aggregation, pattern matching, and doing all sorts of combinations to make sense of the data which is being captured. We are doing things like reducing network load, distributing and processing, pushing all these different devices which are spitting out data and kind of trying to make sense both at the back-end data center, which can be an Oracle or which can be some other cloud offering. And also now we are providing you an architecture which allows you to do that on the device. So with that, this is some more information about the embedded Java, some links to get you started. I will invite Atulan to come up and set up his talk. So this is our grand vision of big data. So we have big data, big analytics, which talks about different domains. We have the smart grid, healthcare, automotive, and we have manufacturing. And each of these domains have their own challenges, their own issues. And what we wanted to do was give you a flavor of what are some of the challenges the manufacturing domain is facing and how a specific company, which is System Insights, is solving those problems. So with that, I would introduce Atulan Vijayaraghavan, who is the CTO of System Insights. And Atulan, why don't you come?
Okay, great. So thank you, Ranbir. Again, my name is Atulan Vijayaraghavan. I'm the CTO and co-founder of System Insights. And I think that was a very nice introduction, and I think it set the theme well for what we have. So just a really quick introduction to what we do at System Insights. We're a startup. We're based in Berkeley, California. We were started about 3.5 years back in early 2009. And we build software tools for manufacturing big data analytics. So our primary product is an analytics platform called Vimana. This provides both real-time and historical information to drive productivity improvement in the shop floor. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So what we do in System Insights is we build software and some hardware to help transition manufacturing decision making, from monitoring the manufacturing process to detecting challenges, issues, failures happening in the manufacturing system, to ultimately be able to predict how the system is going to behave. In order to do this, we apply complex event processing for rapid decision making. We apply machine learning to understand the behavior of manufacturing systems in order to make these predictions. So we bring a lot of technologies both in the cloud to perform analysis on large volumes of data from the shop floor. And we also look at how do we collect data at the lowest level from the shop floor. So we're interested into, putting it in Ranbir's words, we're interested both in the device and in the data center, because we need to control and connect both of them in order to provide value to our customers. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about why we care about manufacturing, right? Both us as a company and why does it even make sense to care about manufacturing. I think one of the interesting takeaways from Judson's keynote yesterday that kicked off Java 1 Embedded was how manufacturing was not mentioned as an area where embedded solutions could help in a big way. And part of that is because it's been very challenging to tap data from manufacturing. And manufacturing has also been an industry which has not been very open to a lot of innovation, especially in terms of connectivity. And that's one of the things which we're trying to change. And we're motivated by very traditional concerns of how do we make more money. So, I think from a business standpoint, manufacturing gives tremendous potential for improvement, which the technologies that we're talking about today can bring. So manufacturing itself is big, and it's really big. There is this very common perception that American manufacturing is losing its place in the world for a variety of political reasons. But if you look at just the numbers, America is still the world's biggest manufacturing market. So it's a $2 trillion sector. And when we talk about discrete manufacturing, or manufacturing that makes things part by part, discrete manufacturing ends up making parts that are directly sold to a consumer. Like something, it would be a turbine blade, it would be a gear that goes in a car, which you would buy. And discrete manufacturing also contributes tooling and other kinds of equipment that goes into the supply chain. So if you have an iPod, the plastic mold, the plastic parts that go into the iPod was probably made on a mold that was manufactured in a discrete manufacturing facility. And these facilities, they give tremendous opportunity for productivity improvement. Now, one analysis said that metal cutting equipment that make features and make parts by removing material, these equipment spend less than 25% of the day doing useful work. So if you look at the overall productivity of the manufacturing sector, this one statistic says that we have about 4 times the capacity that we're currently using. So there is a ton of opportunity to make manufacturing more productive. And one way of doing that is by harnessing the data that manufacturing equipment can provide. And this is a lot. Now, it's not that these machines themselves aren't sophisticated. It's just that the data they generate is not collected centrally, and a lot of that data falls on the floor. So that's really the opportunity we have. And an interesting question, and getting deeper into the process, right? What are we trying to do? Why do we care about manufacturing, right? What are the questions we care about in manufacturing? So one way to look at it is, let's say we have a big hulk of titanium, right? I take that piece of titanium and I put it on a machine and I make it into something that goes inside a jet engine. Now, obviously, the part has to be made within certain specifications. The part has to meet certain design criteria in order for it to perform in that jet engine. So we care about many things related to how effectively are we making this transformation. So we start with the business questions. How productive am I? How much time is my machine running? How profitable am I? What is the overall profitability of this piece of equipment? What is the profitability of this part I'm making on the equipment? Then we might care about larger term things like what's my return on asset, right? How effectively am I using my assets? then we can zoom in on the part. Am I making the part correctly? Is it a quality part? Is it fitting all my requirements? Are the people making the part, are they in a safe environment? Is the product itself reliable? And then we get into concerns that are beyond just our plant. Is it sustainable, right? Am I making the product in an energy efficient manner? Am I creating toxins and am I polluting? So there are a lot of questions that come up as we make this transformation from this big hulk of material to a finished part. And these questions have been answered over and over again using many techniques, and they're continuing to be answered today in manufacturing using, the business as usual methods. But the opportunity we have here with data is we make answering these questions a lot easier, we make our answers more accurate, and we make the cost of getting these answers a whole lot lower. So the interesting thing about manufacturing is that we're not applying big data in coming up with new questions to ask. In manufacturing, we're applying big data in coming up with better answers for questions we already know. So in one sense, we've made a lot of progress in this industry because we already know what we care about. So there have been some discussions on the potential for big data in discrete manufacturing. This is from a report from McKinsey, the Global Institute, the McKinsey Global Institute. In a recent analysis, they talked about the potential of big data in various sectors, and right up the top of the list, based on the total stored data in the United States, was discrete manufacturing. So this says that discrete manufacturing has about 1 exabyte, or in this case, 966 petabytes or petabytes of data that's been stored. And they said, now what are the levers, right? How can we apply this data in making, in improving manufacturing? And they identified several levers across the manufacturing supply chain. And there are a couple which I think are really pertinent based on what we're doing is actually, and that ties to implementing lean manufacturing, model production, digital factory systems to create process transparency, develop dashboards, and visualize bottlenecks. So here, the idea is to apply all this data in finding out, is my overall manufacturing system behaving more efficiently? The second is implementing sensor data-driven operations to improve throughput and enable mass customization. And this is interesting because manufacturing has transformed over the last 100 years from being very, very low mix and very, very high volume. The Ford Model T, you could have it in any color as long as it was black. So that's where manufacturing started, and now we have a whole lot more customization and configuration going inside the manufacturing process because everybody wants to have it in a different way. In order to enable that, you need much tighter control over the process, and that's where getting data from these sensors and harnessing that information comes in. So we are focusing specifically on discrete manufacturing. Now discrete manufacturing is when you're working on individual parts as opposed to continuous or process manufacturing. So food processing, oil and gas, making paint, for instance, that would be a process manufacturing or continuous process manufacturing. Discrete manufacturing is when you're dealing with metal or when you're doing injection molding, things like that. So these facilities, they tend to be large. They have disparate types of equipment. So you're not talking about one huge integrated system in your plant. You're talking about a facility with multiple types of equipment. And these facilities have limited automation. You don't have one cohesive, all-intelligent integrated system that's running the plant. And a lot of the machines are human-driven and human-controlled. The equipment themselves don't have a lot of computational power. The equipment is old, and they generally have a life of about 10 years or more. So what we have is a case of unintegrated islands of excellence. Now, when an outsider comes into a manufacturing shop, everything seems kind of old and falling apart, and they say, wow, these pieces of equipment, they really don't have any capabilities in them. But that's not the right view. It's just that they have a lot of capabilities in doing just the few things they're supposed to do. So they are islands of excellence, but they are islands. They have no way of exchanging information and getting integrated easily to form a larger system. And that's where data can help us. So what kind of data are we talking about? So here is a machine tool. So what you see is you have a big hulk of metal, and we're removing material away to create a part. In this case, it looks like some kind of a complicated gear on a shaft. So we can get a lot of data out of a machine like this. We can get positions, we can get alarms, we can get the design of the part, we can get sensor information like the vibrations, the acoustic, the temperature. We can get things like tribal knowledge. So we can get information pertaining to how an operator, a human being, reacted as this part was being made. So there is a lot of data that can be collected, and depending on the kind of data, the resolution, the scope, and the input you have to put in to get this data can vary. Now, some of this is very straightforward, right? Acoustics or vibration, you have the right kind of sensors. Other kind of data can be quite complicated, especially data pertaining to tribal knowledge. Now, this is data that a skilled operator would have, and how he or she comes in to control the manufacturing process. So we're talking about very, very different types of data, and we're talking about many, many different types of data that even a single piece of equipment can generate. And this data also varies so this data also varies in different levels of analysis. So we have the actual manufacturing process, right? And there's all the science and the technology that goes into the process, all the way up to the manufacturing supply chain. So if I had to zoom in, I have my manufacturing process, and then I have the equipment, then I have a factory or an enterprise making the part, and then I have my supply chain that could be across multiple continents. So that we have that on the y-axis, and on the x-axis we have decision scales. So with all of these, with data from all of these different scales, when do we make decisions? So we can have analysis in the microseconds or subseconds, all the way to analysis happening in a matter of days. So I like to think of this as real-time analysis and real-time decisions, near-time decisions, and anytime decisions. And the distinction is real-time is usually in what we call the command and control loop. So we have to make this decision because it will affect the quality of the part, it will affect the manufacturing process, it will affect the machine, it will affect somebody's health. Anytime are decisions that are primarily managerial decisions. And these are decisions that are taken by an ERP system. These are decisions that are taken by an MRP system. So these are not decisions that have to happen at the shop floor itself. In the middle, you have this vast gulf, and this is where you have near-time decisions. These are decisions that you can take to actually improve the process. And these decisions, you can take them in seconds, you can take them in hours, you can take them in days. And this is the space where we don't have a lot of tools, and this is the place where we are missing the most amount of data. Because to manage a manufacturing process, financial information is generally enough if you're doing high-level management at an enterprise level. And individual machines, controllers, sensors do a really good job managing data at the low level of process control. So in between, when you have near-time decision making, that's where you have the biggest gap. Okay, so given these temporal scales, how much data are we actually talking? Now, we did some estimates, and we estimated that the American manufacturing or the American machine tool sector can potentially generate anywhere from 200 petabytes to 950 petabytes of data per year. So that's almost an exabyte if you turn on all of the machine tools in America today, and you are pumping out the maximum possible data from them. Again, a lot of these machines don't have capabilities to communicate this, which is what we're trying to address. But the potential exists to collect about an exabyte of data per year just from machine tools in the US today. And on a global scale, you're talking 30 to 50 times more than that. And depending on the kind of facility you are, if you're a small shop with just about 10 machines, you could be generating up to 10 terabytes of data, all the way to a large enterprise. If you're Boeing or Lockheed Martin or Curtiss-Wright, you could be generating a few petabytes of data just by yourself per year. So there is a huge potential. And what's interesting is that if you take this 950 number, McKinsey points out that that is the amount of stored data that this sector has all put together. But now if you turn on real-time data capture, real-time streaming analysis, you basically create that much data every year. So this is truly a big data challenge because you have to deal with this information. You may not want to store all of this. You may want to just dump some of this information. So now you're dealing with a much more interesting, much more critical problem, which we're trying to solve. So what do you do with all this? Why do you need all of this data, right? We don't want it just for the sake that we have it. So what are some of the grand challenges of manufacturing that this data can solve? So one is enterprise traceability. So instead of the boxes, let's try and work this out with an actual example. So a couple of years back, there was an Airbus A380 in one of its first flights. The plane developed an engine malfunction and it had to land in Singapore. Now, it turned out that the plane had to land because one component in the engine had blown out. And so there was a big malfunction and it was unexpected. It was a new engine. It hadn't gone through a lot of testing. And basically they did a bunch of evaluation and they found out that it was a specific component that had failed. Now, that component was made in a discrete manufacturing facility. And if we had traceability data, if we had data that could trace what exactly had happened to that part when it got manufactured, if we knew who had made the part, when the part was made, which machine made the part, what were the environmental conditions? Was the part made in a very humid environment? Was the part made when it was really hot outside? What was the machine doing when the part was made? Was there excessive vibration? Was there excessive noise? What was the operator doing when the part was made? Do we have any way of telling if it was done at 2 a.m. in the night when the operator was tired and there is a greater chance that a mistake was made? So with traceability information, we have a complete record of how this part was made. So now, if you were Airbus and you had this traceability information, you could say, here is a defective part that almost brought a plane down. Now, let me look at the data and find out if there's anything funny with it. Are there any anomalies? Do I have any deviations from the plan? And then, if we go back to our petabyte storage, right, sitting in a big database somewhere, we can now say, let me look inside this database and let me find out all of the other parts that hopefully are not in the air, that are probably in a warehouse somewhere, that demonstrate the exact same flaw or that were manufactured under exactly similar flawed conditions, and then we can isolate them. So traceability gives us a way of controlling the manufacturing process, and not just control, but capture everything that went into that process so that we can make effective long-term decisions based on how the process happened. And this involves capturing data from the part as it moves across the manufacturing process through transfer stations and sharing that information across the entire supply chain. So if you're an OEM, you're buying this from a vendor, the OEM wants to have it. You want to have this information flow through the supply chain. And if this is an airline part, you want the FAA wants to have access to that data. If, for example, this is a hip replacement, the FDA wants to have access to the data. So there are also regulatory requirements that this kind of data can address. So another grand challenge is how do we improve the energy efficiency and how do we manage the energy consumption of manufacturing processes in a better way? And here we have a classic, loop problem, right? We want to measure the manufacturing process. We want to find out what's happening in the machine. We want to find out what is the energy consumption. We want to find out what is the impact of the process on the environment. And then we want to, and we do that by monitoring the process. And then with enough data, we can say, okay, here is how I should be manufacturing the part. Here is the options, here is the approach I should take in manufacturing the part such that I decrease my energy consumption. And then the only way I can validate it is I try it out in the field and we go down that loop again. So this is a classic continuous improvement cycle. So we can't fix this in one shot because we have too many variables in the system. So the effective way of doing this is you keep making these small improvements and you make sure that overall you're improving energy efficiency. So this is another challenge because energy management is not something that we care about just in one plant, but this is truly global because when you have manufacturing processes moving from site to site or from country to country, the ramifications of energy consumption could be different. So with these grand challenges, right, how would a big data stack look for manufacturing? So we would need 3 pieces, and these are very big, chunky pieces. So one piece is data collection. We need ways of efficiently capturing data from manufacturing equipment. The second is we need ways of collecting, storing, and having that data available for analysis. And the third is we need technologies such as complex event processing, statistical machine learning, in actually acting upon this data and provide value to the customer. And our stack, our software stack, is based on this kind of a platform. So this is the architecture of our Vimana product. This is a software as a service product that we host it, and we collect data from our customer facilities in real time. So we have data flowing in, it's captured, we have a data bus, and then we send the data away for complex event processing, for real-time pattern matching. We send it into a machine learning service to find historical analysis, to do historical analysis, and we store all the data so that we have a very, very high density record of everything that happened in the manufacturing system. And based on that, we build out user interfaces, reports, and we tell the customer how the shop is behaving. And they use this data in improving their manufacturing processes and in addressing some of these grand challenges that I talked about. So Vimana provides this information. This is just a screenshot, just to give you a sense of what the application itself looks like. So Vimana tries to answer questions that people have about manufacturing. Vimana tries to answer, why am I not doing the right thing? So a common problem in manufacturing is you know something is wrong because your machines aren't producing anything, but you don't know why. And most manufacturing approaches look at just telling you that your machine is up or your machine is down. You don't have context to help you go solve the problem. So what we try to do with the big data approach, what we try to do with all of this information from the machine, is to answer the more interesting question of why is the machine down, or why is the machine not producing parts, or why is the machine producing bad parts. And the data for all of this, for this auto classification, as we like to call it, comes from various sources, including sensors, controllers, the user, and other entities in the manufacturing system. So this information is available real time, it's available on dashboards, and you have it in a reporting system that pulls data over historical periods. So the idea is, as a customer, right, as an end user, as somebody in a manufacturing shop who cares about its current performance, its historical performance, and with an eye on keeping it performing into the future, this gives you a pretty holistic view. So you have real-time access to the system, you have historical analysis, and you also get to customize what kind of data you're seeing, because we can integrate with a lot of type of equipment and a lot of type of data sources. So this is all good, right? We have a stack, we have software, we have grand challenges. So why are we here, right? We don't have any problems. Well, we actually do. There is a big gap in big data, and that gap is in data collection. So we still do not have as much data as we can potentially get from the manufacturing shop floor. Again, there is a ton of potential. There are a ton of applications to the data. There is very proven business value in what you can do with this information. But because of a variety of historical reasons, there is a very, very large gap in data collection. So if we walk around, Oracle Open World, we can see many, many instantiations of the stack I talked about, right? There are tools for databases, there are tools for analysis. Ranbir talked about OEP in the cloud. We have OEP on the embedded. All of this is great, right? But the big gap is in the actual collection of the data from the manufacturing shop. So this is how we'd like it to be, right? We have devices, we have the data center, and there's a really tiny gap between them, and it's easy to get them together. Well, that's not the case. What is actually the case is that we are missing a very big piece of getting information from the device into the data center. And part of that is because we lack effective standards and we lack effective tools to apply these standards to get data from these edges into the cloud or into the enterprise. So a lack of standardized data sources, because the shop floor has complex, disparate types of equipment with proprietary interfaces, this has turned out to be the biggest gap in having the kind of end-to-end connectivity that we've always wanted in the manufacturing world. Okay, so one way of addressing that was proposed by AMT a few years back, and this became the MT Connect standard. And there is now an institute called the MT Connect Institute that supports the development of the standard. And MT Connect is an open standard that defines a protocol and an exchange format to facilitate communication between devices in a manufacturing system. So MT Connect is a data exchange standard. It's based on XML and TCP/IP. It's extensible, it's lightweight, it's really easy to implement. And the problems that MT Connect addresses is that in manufacturing, we've had an abundance of protocols. We've had an abundance of data formats. We've had every type of machine in a discrete manufacturing setup shipping with its own proprietary interfaces and APIs. And setting up any kind of communication or integration between these interfaces has been very challenging. So MT Connect gives a very lightweight solution to solving this problem of inter-device communication or interoperability in the shop floor. And MT Connect also plays very nicely with other standards. So MT Connect integrates very well with existing approaches like OPC and other standards in the manufacturing world. Okay, so given the fact that we now have some standards which can help manufacturing, let's kind of pivot back to the focus of this talk is how do we make this connection, right? How do we bridge the device to the data center? And this is where some of the technologies that Java has can play a pretty major role. So we believe that with Java SE embedded technology, we have a very compelling way of connecting up the shop floor to the cloud. And the big gap we see is, the big gap which we have seen, which I've talked about, is how do we get information from all of these devices into the data center? So what we're looking at is, we're looking at developing devices using Java SE embedded technology to help in collecting data from the shop floor. So these devices can get information from a variety of shop floor data sources, including CNCs, PLCs, sensors, power meters, barcode scanners, tablet PCs, where an operator punches in some values, you name it. And we envision these hardware devices as being powered using the MT Connect standard so that they can exchange information in a standard format. And on top of that, right, so this gives you a nice fat pipe of MT Connect data. And now you can have applications like Vimana sitting on top of that, which now have access to a whole lot more data from the shop floor that this kind of a device would enable. So, and this is a pretty compelling use case for Java SE embedded. I think some of the applications that Ranbir talked about, like JES and OEP, they fit really well, because some of the things we need this device to be is, firstly, it needs to be pervasive. It should be pretty easy to take this to any kind of a manufacturing environment and ubiquitously get it working with different types of equipment and do it in a cost-effective fashion. It has to be device agnostic, so you should be able to work with old systems, new systems, sensor systems, and the like. It should be based on standards. MT Connect is perfect for this, but obviously it should support other standards as well. And the solution should be scalable. So you should have capabilities of going into a shop with 5 machines and hooking it up in the same way you would hook up a shop with 1,000 machines. So we see the Java SE Embedded Suite and other products that we've been speaking about as a very nice fit here. And we see this as forming a very critical piece of the integration from the device to the data center in the manufacturing world. So with that, I'm done. And I think we have about 15 minutes for questions. Yes?
Thank you for your presentation. Maybe one question about the patterns, the OEP being used. So I understand OEP being used on backend, right? So when you start moving it closer to the edge, what do you think would be the most relevant patterns for using OEP? For instance, one that you mentioned is filtering, right? In my opinion, it's not necessarily the best one in the context of big data, because big data is all about pushing the data to the back end, so that eventually you have a lot of data, and when you start doing statistical analysis and machine learning, what matters the most is actually not the algorithm, but the amount of data, right? So I think there'll be other things that are more pertinent, maybe like real time and real time correlation. So just wanted to understand, what do you think are the best patterns for using OEP on the edge, on the embedded, versus the
Sure.
on the server side?
Actually, filtering is an interesting example because I agree with the point you make about how you don't want filtering per se because you want to collect as much data as possible in the cloud. But filtering, in our opinion, is a good candidate to do in the edge, not because you want to restrict data to the cloud, but because you want to take decisions in different time frames. So if you want to have instant decisions, you can do some low-level processing and low-level filtering in the edge and stream the high bandwidth data at the same time.
Okay.
So
that depends what the definition is filtering. When I heard filtering, I didn't mind you don't send a subset of the data only, but you really want to do both.
exactly. So one nice case of OEP is that it allows us to select, it allows us to filter and send the full pipe. Right. Another example would be correlations. The thing is, and this is where that's why in our stack we use both CEP and machine learning. So machine learning is more the classic big data problem, right? So we have the huge trove of data to say, here is a correlation, right? Here is a correlation between temperature and failure. So when we instantiate a pattern saying, I have a certain temperature trend, now that will become a pattern in CEP. So I think that's another common pattern which we see is basically some kind of thresholding. So comparing a stream of data over a window of time to a function. So from simple things like are you above or below a value to more complex things like are you going up a slope, are you hitting a waveform, things like that.
You're not doing machine learning per se on the embedded, are you?
No. The machine learning is not being done on the edges. Okay. The machine learning is being done on the cloud, and the patterns could be implemented on the edges.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you, so in this case you are using the embedded, so you are using Java DB to store process data on the edge for temporarily and then move it to the backend.
So that's the architecture we are proposing. So currently we have a product which is a suite, and so Jay Suri is the senior principal. Why don't you stand up, Jay? So he's the senior principal product manager, and I stole most of his slides to create this talk, by the way. So thanks, Jay. So the product team has a vision of creating a stack which lets you do edge analytics. You don't need to do that. If it makes sense for you to have that round trip back to the data center, to the big cloud, and do that analytics and all the other things which he mentioned, we are okay to do that. But in cases where now the devices, the nodes can have that intelligence and should make that decision, currently we didn't have anything. So the OEP and the stack and what his vision is to create that availability of analytics on the edge devices. So if your use case finds that I can save that round trip by doing analytics on this edge device, we from Oracle, we have a product stack and it fits right in his scheme. So these are the domain experts. So what you see here is a validation from a manufacturing perspective, what Jay and other guys basically spend sleepless nights doing in architecting that product. So what we tried to show was the perfect marriage and by taking an example of manufacturing. But there are complex decisions to be made. There are various different use cases which govern how you would architect your systems. But we just wanted to give a snapshot of this particular narrow view of edge analytics.
And I think specific to your point of persistence, right now we don't use the Jest stack, and that's one of the things that's going to come out of this is we are looking at picking Java, embedded as our platform of choice, on the embedded side or on the edge side. But persistence is a really good use case for us because right now we see that as a problem in having reliability, because we run using an SLA, and and we do a lot of work in places like India where you don't have reliable network, and lack of persistence is actually a pretty big problem for us today, because we basically have machine shops that are streaming us huge amounts of data over really, really crappy network connections. And
the whole story about the Centurion wireless module, why don't you tell them about?
And one of the things I think we spoke to some of the Java folks about was some of these wireless devices that have the Java stack running on them. So we definitely see that. Actually, that's kind of what makes this interesting for us, is that some of this capability we get for free, right? It's just provided as is, as part of the suite, and it's a very good fit with our requirements. Yes.
So is MD Connect a device-to-device protocol or standard order, and at what layer does it define a network layer, an application layer? How deep does that protocol go?
Actually, we have Will Sobel, who's the author of the spec. So, Will, do you want to answer that question? I'll embarrass myself if I answer it in front of him.
So Will, we wanted to use the mic. Can you come?
Okay, sure.
You thought we?
I should have come in this room.
Yeah. You thought we'd just let you doze off in the back?
I was enjoying my nap. No, MT Connect it can be device to device. It's a protocol for getting data off of a device. So it's a read-only, and it uses standard protocols like HTTP and XML representations of that data. From an application, it does not go up to the application level. We don't interpret the data, we just report the data. So it's a pretty low-level protocol in that we specifically designed it so that it wasn't going to be deciding whether the state of the machine was good or bad. The machine can report that information, but it's going to be reporting sort of the raw information or the raw data model off that machine and contextualize it. What we wanted to do is come up with a normalized set of units and names. So when we talk about the position of the linear x-axis, we always use the same word to represent that piece of information, regardless of what machine you get off of it. And everything is defined, the entire vocabulary is defined. So when you go to an application like ours, or an application like any of the applications that use MT Connect out there, they're all using the exact same vocabulary to talk about that data, which makes it very easy. I can go to any machine and I can immediately understand what's going on in that machine without having to build specific adapters and drivers within the application layer to be able to interpret it. So to get back to your question, basically, MT Connect it's below the application layer, it's at the data layer. I'd say from a computer type of, it's a higher level than SNMP, but it's in that domain of raw information coming off, or raw data coming off of the machine, which gives a really good opportunity for applications to then figure out whatever they want to about that data. When we talk about big data, basically you're talking about the idea that you want to collect as much of the raw information, uninterpreted as you can, because the more interpretation, the more downsampling that's done, the more assumptions that are made at the low level, the harder it is to be able to then, at the high level, analyze that data and do anything interesting with it, because somebody's already kind of mucked around with it. So we like low-level data.
So you always assume that the machines are IP capable and always connected?
Actually, that's exactly what we're working on this device for.
So
because
the device connects to a machine.
So the problem we have in manufacturing is the average machine tool is not IP capable. The average machine tool, so the thing on the box that will make the machine MT Connect compatible is the agent. It's a little web server that runs on the box. If you have a new machine with the right kind of software and hardware in it, right, you can basically run the MT Connect web server agent on the machine itself, right? Because a lot of new machines today have that capability. But if you look at the 2 million plus machines in the US today, or the 30 million plus in the world today, about 5% of them have this capability natively. So this is kind of a solution for the other 95% to even have this basic capabilities of, can they run this web server and can they respond to an empty connect request?
Yes, please.
I'm still curious about the grammar of your data description. It appears to me that this is open-ended and basically endless. There were many protocols which try to address this problem. People start from simple key value pairs and then nesting comes to the picture. And then the question is, where do I stop and somebody else will come and create another black hole? Is their own data definition. So how you address it?
Well, the standard is extensible, so we don't say we're going to cover the entire manufacturing domain because, as you said, it's infinite. But at the same time, there's a lot about the domain that we can define in an unambiguous manner. So for, let's say, we hit 20, 30% of the known data items. We can give that 20 to 30% very unambiguous, well-defined names, like the execution states, the controller modes, the positions of various different axes, and the paths, and motion control, and things along that line. Let's say we can define that layer. You've got that. Now let's say we go into another domain like additive or something that we haven't dealt with like water jet or some other types of machines. You can always extend it out, create the new components that you need. It's XML, extensible. You can create your own namespace and put in those components and then add the data items in there. We can also do things like, we have a lot of sensor data in there now. We've probably covered more sensor type of data in MT Connect now than any other standard has. And we've standardized it in that we've come up with the units and the naming of all those data types, as well as handling time series and most of what people will need to be able to do analysis on machines. So we've streamed audio data and other things. So I think if you take MT Connect as it is right now, you'll probably get most of the way there. You can then extend it out like a lot of our customers, or a lot of the users have done, and implementers of MT Connect have done. There's 105 implementers right now out there. 105 companies, basically they've extended it out to meet their needs, whether it's process level stuff or specific components on their machine or whatever they want to do. And we allow that and we encourage that because we know as a standards organization, we don't try to say, we're going to solve everything in the world because we'd be working on this thing indefinitely and never get the damn thing out there.
Well, and the other thing is, from the MT Connect perspective, there's a level of pragmatism which kind of reflects in our approach as well, is what percentage or what fraction of the problems are we solving with the data that is standardized? Mm-hmm. And I think version 1 of MT Connect was at maybe 75%. So with that data, 75% of your low-hanging fruit problems are solved. And now we are probably at 98. And I'm absolutely certain there's stuff we're missing. But we're pretty confident it's in the 2%. And the thing is, again, like Will said, that's where the extensibility comes in, because that 2%, sometimes it's not worth the effort to actually compete and kind of bang each other on the head to standardize it. And that is stuff that people can define on their own. But I think we have to. Ranveer is cutting me. He does a good job of cutting people off. So
so we are getting to that end. So if we can take just one last question. You had one question?
No, my question was, are you using internally RESTful or anything like that, or?
It's RESTful.
It's RESTful, yes.
It's RESTful.
We have a Java 1 technical session at 3:30 today, which is going to go more deeper into the technical aspects. This is more of a business kind of a presentation. So we'll encourage you guys, if you guys have more technical questions, to come to that. So with that, I thank Will and Atulan, and hope you guys had fun.